So Aarvoll, which is who is a rather a YouTuber on here, put out a video titled "Questions for Nationalists," and I think he has some pretty good questions. I do like his content. I think he makes some good stuff. He's definitely worth watching. He has some issues with nationalism and some of the people who call themselves nationalists online. He disagrees with some of the things they say. And anyways, yeah, he put out this video, and I thought it was an interesting video. I thought he had some good questions, and I think as someone who identifies as a nationalist, and in particular one who would call themselves, or who would sympathize with ethnic nationalism, I I suppose I'm willing to answer these questions. I'm also willing to have a conversation with Aarvoll if he wants to do that. That's perfectly fine with me. I don't care if it's on his channel or my channel, but yeah, I'm going to address these questions, and I'm also going to address some of the. He made some extra points beforehand, but I'll address those after I address the questions, which I was able to pick out about four solid questions he asked. So basically, yeah, we're going to just start here. So one of the first questions he asked was, does any ethnic separatist group get legitimacy? So, in other words, does any ethnic group have the right to separate and become, or and have their own state? And my answer to this was, as long as they're a genuine ethnic group and willing to cooperate with others and not subvert the sovereignty of other groups, um, then that's fine. If they're not a genuine ethnic group, I say that they ought to remain loyal to their actual group, the same way one ought to remain loyal to their family. One should not have the right to abandon one's family, and thus their extended family being their ethnic group. Now, you can make the basis for ethnic nationalism simply by saying, and this is very much Jared Taylor's point, that you should be loyal to your family because you share a common you share blood with them. You share an origin with them. You come from the same, you share a similar essence to them, essentially. And that's why you should remain loyal to them. Now, this principle extends to people who are like you, genetically, thus, in a sense, they share the same essence with you, and there's a reason why you want to be closer to them. There's a reason why people naturally are or have in-group preference. That doesn't exist for no reason. Now, I'm not saying because it exists, therefore, one should obey that instinct, but I am saying that um, for the same reason, you must be loyal to your family, you must be loyal to your extended family. That's my ethical justification for it. Now, moving on to the second question, he asks, where's the enforcement mechanism if you want nations for all people? Also, how does this happen globally and cooperatively? Now, this is a good question, actually. So, how are all these ethnic groups going to have their own state in a cooperative manner without ripping each other's heads off? Now, my answer to this was the enforcement mechanism lays within those who wish to self determine. So, those who prevent this act of self determination may be acted against, uh, basically in a manner of collective self defense. I'd also add this can be done cooperatively through the recognition of ethical principles, namely of the moral duty to act with fidelity towards those close to you, which is what I just mentioned before. In a more pragmatic sense, also you could actually use the existing international institutions and non-governmental organizations to promote this ethical principle. However, I do think that's a little far-fetched at the moment, and if that was to happen, that wouldn't be for quite some time. So the third question he asks is, are other non-ethnic forms of nationalism respected, such as civic or religious? And I would say no, because one ought to be loyal to their family and thus their extended family, once again, harkening back to that principle I mentioned earlier. And one can still practice religious traditions within the bounds of their ethnic group. That doesn't prevent them from practicing their religious tradition, so long as their religious tradition isn't explicitly detrimental to the existence of the ethnic group. That if their religious tradition says you can't identify or commune with those who are like you exclusively, you must live amongst other people as well, then I would say that's an issue. Um, and I would also say, well, there's more. We can go into the religious stuff later because religion is not something you just pick out of a hat and say, oh, I like this religion, it fits me. Religion should You should pick a religion based on whether or not you think it's true. Many ethno-nationalists, for some reason, seem to throw that out the window. That is a critique of them that I do have. But continuing on with that, and it's not as if you can't meet or commune with people from other ethnic groups. I'm not like me personally. I'm not an isolationist in that sense. I do think that if you have these separate ethnic states, you would have to have like a form of international relations. You have to communicate with the outside world, and you could have allies. You can make deals between nations. That's perfectly fine in my view. And it's something that should be done. You could benefit from that. It actually benefit your particular ethnic group to do things like that and make friends with other ethno states to whatever benefit yourself and just have natural allies around you. You could mostly good things can come from that. So the fourth question he asks, and the response here is going to be a little long. If ethnic groups have the right to self-determine, then why don't individuals within that ethnic group have this right to determine what they want to do as an individual? So the answer to this is simply because individuals aren't atomized beings and are connected to a community whom they share ties with, and thus a loyalty to, as all their actions affect the rest of the community, as when one affects themselves, they affect others. Through the way, basically, when you affect yourself, you're going to affect others, at the very least, through the way you relate to others. This is much like the idea from Leibniz of all things affecting one another, or that basically when you do something to one thing, um, it affects the existence of all other things because we all share, and ontologies as a whole all share the same being at the lowest level. So a way to visualize this, I guess, is to think of ripples in a pond, right? You drop a pebble in a pond, and what happens is the effect of that dropping spreads out across the whole pond. Um, Anyways, yeah. So I'm not, once again, I'm not an isolationist. I do think there needs to be a genuine universal morality between all people, and this just extends, in my view, from individuals ought to respect one another, and then therefore groups which are made up of individuals ought to respect one another. And I'd also say an individual not respecting group interest is in some cases, and actually in almost most cases, an individual not respecting group interests is an instance of individuals not respecting other individuals because groups are made up of individuals. And this would also be the case in that of ethnic interest. So now I'm just going to address some of the other points that he made. These aren't really questions. These were just things he was trying to say and points he was trying to make. So he said nationalism and ethnocentrism should not be conflated because you can value the sovereignty of your ethnic group without belonging to a set plot of land with a state and a nation. You can be an international ethnocentrist. So defining nationalism as wanting what's best for your ethnic group is problematic. Now, I actually agree that you could be an ethnocentrist and not a nationalist. You can be an international ethnocentrist if you so like to. But, um, you know, one can very easily call themselves a nationalist while being an ethnocentrist by saying that a nation for their people is in their best interest. And I think that's what most people like me, people like Keith Woods and Joel Davis are saying. And I don't really think it's that complicated. So, he also, moving on, he makes another point saying universal ethno-nationalism and the ideology of universal ethno-nationalism that has its basis in self-determination is a liberal idea. And in the universal sense, yeah, I would agree. I think that's true, but it's not really relevant to anything. That's not relevant to whether or not it's a good idea or a bad idea. It's just you just identified the nature of that idea. Okay. Um, so he also says defining yourself as a nationalist will get the feds on your back, so it's not helpful. Well, he's not wrong, but again, the feds, they're going to be on your back anyway. And even if you don't use that term, so long as you express any ethnic self-interest, they're going to be on your back to begin with if you express any ethnic self-interest. So it doesn't really make a difference, in my opinion. Defining yourself as a nationalist, he says, will attract low IQ people, incapable of conversation, and who also have problematic personalities. This is a good point, but this doesn't really seem like a strong enough reason to get rid of using the term altogether. In my opinion, when you form any group, you're likely to receive people who are just not compatible with the group that you're in. There's always bad apples in a group. Aarvoll doesn't actually provide any reason to suggest that this happens more in nationalist circles. I don't know why he thinks it does. I mean, he's not wrong. There are like insufferable people in the dissident right, that's for sure. There's definitely insufferable people in the dissident right, but I think that's more of an internet thing than anything else because the internet just enhances the ability for insufferable people to partake in discourse. So I think that's more of a technological issue than anything. He also says in this video that he agrees with many of the goals and sentiments of nationalists, but he says that the will to achieve a state, an ethno state, is not the best route, and he thinks there's better ways of doing that. Which, okay, fair enough. But I have yet to hear these ways. Maybe he did make a video about that. If someone could link me to that, that's fine. But my question for him now is, okay, Aarvoll, then what is your alternative? What's the better way to achieve these things uh, for for people with ethnic self-interest? That's my question. So for Aarvoll, people with ethnic self-interest, what is the best way for them to achieve their goals if not an ethno state or the attempt to have a state that promotes their ethnic interest? So thanks for watching. Please share this video with him. If any of you know him, please show this to him. I'd love to have a conversation with him, or if he wants to make a response video, that's perfectly fine as well. But yeah, that's going to be about it. Thanks, guys, and we'll have more content soon. I've been away for a while, so I apologize.